Hello and welcome to Spoopy, a place where I talk about whatever I want because I can and because I have no one else to rant to. Today's topic being Danny Phantom and DC Crossover. When I first found this, which was on Tumblr, which is kind of, I feel like where I usually, well not usually, but it is sometimes where I find a lot of topics that I'm like, this is kind of interesting. But I first stumbled upon it. I didn't even, like, it never came across, like, you just don't think of certain crossovers because they're so different, or you would just never think of them in a way. Like, that was the same thing for Danny Phantom and DC for me. I just never thought, and it's been like years since I even watched Danny Phantom 2. So, still remember everything about it. Just like, it's just been years since I've like rewatched the entire show. So when I first read, like the first prompt I ever read, I don't even remember what it was about now because I read so many, but I didn't even really realize it was a crossover because I was just like, oh yeah, Danny Phantom. I'm like, wow, this is, because it just showed up in like my like suggestion, and I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't even like, so I was like, Danny Phantom, like this is shocking, but okay. I guess because I did like some fan art of Danny Phantom, sure. And then it got halfway through, I'm like, wait, like, and that's when I guess I realized, like, oh, it's a crossover, okay, interesting. And I was like, this crossover is actually really good. There's a whole community of it. I'm like, Jesus. It's actually really good. I mean, with that, there's like certain tropes overall in the entire thing that I feel like everyone includes, which is like with Jason, which I actually really like, because it, like, so Jason, you know, being dumped in Lazarus pits, the headcanon is that Lazarus pits usually it's corrupted. It's not all the time in fanfiction, but in a lot of them, the Lazarus pits are like corrupted ectoplasm, and Jason, having been dunked in it, essentially has like in his core corrupted ectoplasm. That's why he's got these crazy move screens, and he's like, you know, he's always angry. I feel like I'm not even explaining well, but like that's kind of what they place Lazarus pits up is just corrupted ectoplasm. I love that because it usually pairs well with, you know, the whole ship of Danny and Jason, because Danny already being half dead, they usually have Jason as like also half dead but not quite there, or just some other dead like adjacent. And so Jason is kind of like, he has no idea about being like half dead or ghost or anything like that. So, and usually they do bring up dead man, like in some fanfictions where that's kind of their only like experience with ghosts, and never really like the ghosts from like the infinite realms or anything, which, oh boy, is a whole different, it's a whole different thing. And I love that. So it's usually with those pairings, it leads to like funny misunderstandings, and you know, because Danny knows a lot more about it, but he's also really terrible at explaining things. Jason often is left confused and with more questions than answers whenever Danny ends up explaining anything to him about like what happened to him and what he's going through. So he's just like, what are you talking about to me right now? Like, oh, like I'm dead. It's like, you know, because usually I think of the whole dead thing. That's the whole dead thing, right? So that, which is like a touch subject to bring up. So it's a cute pairing, and like I love it because it usually includes some angst too, like because of course both dead, and a lot of dead jokes because that's what they're like. Another pairing would be Tim. They all have ship names, but I don't even really remember what they are at this point. But then you have, like, one of them's like dead serious, but I think that's between Danny and Damian, which are not, but then you have Tim and Danny. Tim and Danny, I remember reading one where Tim is basically like, he's like brides, he's like sacrifices a bride to him, because, which in plenty of fanfiction, like headcanons, little prompts, they have it where people often think of Pure Dark as the Ghost King and not so they don't know that a new ruler has stepped in or anything like that, and that Danny is the new king and not Pure Dark, which I end up loving because it does give the wrong impression of like, oh, it's like you're, and he's like, no, and then you just get Danny and he's an idiot. So like, yeah, he's gonna conquer the world, all right. So but it is interesting. So one of them are where Tim sacrifices a bride to him. He's kind of freaking out. He's like, I don't know how to get back, and because he's kind of like he's stuck in different realms, and it's like, well, Danny's just like, Tim's kind of like naturally like he's surprised by Danny because like the idea of like, oh, the king he's like wants to conquer, and like he's supposed to be like it's not a great person, because Pure Dark wasn't exactly a great person, and then you come across Danny, and it's just like, oh, okay. So it's like a twist for them, and I love that. It's so, I don't know, I don't read too many of them with that pairing. I feel that because I think the first pairing I ever stumbled across was between, like the first pairing, I started out with just like none. There was just a crossover between them and then them running into each other. But the first actual pairing I ever read was between Jason and Danny, and I just kind of loved the whole like being dead thing, and that's what they have in common. But I still do like the whole Tim and Date because it's very, it's very funny and very cute. Just so it's not another one is Danny, for whatever reason, I don't know who even came up with this, being de-aged. It is, I don't know why, but it's the funniest thing, because it's not always, I shouldn't say always in like a lot of fanfiction, but I do like fanfics where it's Danny de-aged, and like, he still has all his memories, powers, and whatever, right? And he just goes around Gotham causing chaos. Not in like a destructive, like truly like terrible, like crazy way, just like he is clearly a menace. Like he is very clearly like a menace, right? And I don't know why, I just love that idea. Just him causing chaos. And like and it shows like it oftentimes like he'll show off sometimes that he can be a threat if he really wants to be. It's just messing around with everyone. So he doesn't, shows that he very clearly doesn't really like take it serious. He's just very clearly messing around, which I also do love fanfics like that, where it shows Danny, like, they'll have it where they're not in the same universe, where it's, because, you can travel through infinite realms, and the infinite realms is, infinite. So travel to different dimensions. So Danny would, like the scientist one, Danny goes to the DC universe, right? So to let off some steam, but he doesn't do it as Danny Phantom. He just does it as himself, and he uses his like his engineering skills and him as like being like a scientist to be a bad scientist. Again, he doesn't do anything completely like destructive or anything. Like one of the first things he does when he's in that universe is live broadcast to everyone how to make insulin at home, because it's cheaper. And so like that's what he does. He purposely messes things up, but in a way that's like, well, he's not wrong, but like it's like Danny. So and because he's not from that universe, he doesn't like you can just go buy like Danny Phantom. Like he doesn't no reason to hide his identity. He's not from the universe. You can't track him to his home universe, so he has no reason for it. And I love another one where he goes to Star City, so it's because it's usually with Gotham or even with Metropolis. I've never seen him with like different, but he goes to Star City in this one. So you have, I don't say Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and he's like a mad scientist there. They're in the same universe, so he exists there. I'm pretty sure. But he's like a mad scientist, but he's very much like Dr. Doofenshmirtz. So he's like, this is my nature. It's like, okay. It's like, it'll clean up the ocean. It's like, oh, okay. He's like, and you know, Green Arrow's just like, I'm gonna have to explain to Aquaman how his ocean suddenly became much cleaner. It's like, and then he's like, I'm gonna use it to like, it's like, I'm gonna have to explain all this. And he's like keeping you secret from the justice. Like no one can know about it. Like no one can know about it. And it does the whole thing with like the, you know, where Doofenshmirtz can't like recognize like Perry the Platypus without his hat. Does the same thing with him. He's like, with Green Arrow, can't recognize him without the mask and the hat. And he's like, a guy with like a goatee and dressed as Green Arrow. It's like, and then puts on, it's like, Green Arrow. It's like, you need glasses. Like what? It's like, this isn't, you okay? So I love that. And I like how they take on the city. The city are just watching, because like, again, he's like Dr. Doofenshmirtz. He's not really causing any harm. He's just, so the majority of the city think he's just going through a phase. Because they think, because in this one, like, Danny and him have a very clearly have a father-son type of relationship. And because of that, the city thinks he's just going through a phase. Like, oh, he's just going through this little villain phase, and his dad just like, that's legit what the entirety of the city thinks. He's just going through a phase. Like, you know, I mean, is it a phase? But those are always my favorites, where he just kind of runs around causing chaos just for no reason other than he can. And he's just like, well, especially when he's like DH the kid, he's like, well, I'm a child, I can't be held accountable for this. And just goes with it. So he never really thinks about it. It's just like, well, this is happening, and just goes with it. It's so, a lot of people are like creative with it too, I should say, because they definitely caught situations where I never would have thought of. Like, there was one where Danny was somehow turned into a cat. Guess who picks him up? Damian. And so they name him Snitches, by the way, because that's exactly what he does do. He snitches on them. So like, when Bruce is up and he's not supposed to be because he has like a fever and it's like middle of the night, he has a fever, so he's obviously grounded. He's not supposed to be doing any Batman things. And he just sees the cat there and he's like, don't do it. And obviously Danny is named Snitches for a reason. He immediately snitches, he yells incredibly loud, it wakes everyone in the mansion. He's like, oh. So, and the same thing with Tim. Too much coffee, like, you need to go to sleep. Alright then. And so he always snitches on them to Alfred, I should say. And I love it. It makes it interesting. I mean, I don't know how he got turned into a cat, but like, but it's so, I love it, because even though like they can admit like they're not wrong, even though they can admit like, they don't always appreciate him, they can always, like, you know, they care for him, so they need him Snitches, because he snitches on them. Like, this loud pride, he snitches immediately. Let's see. One of the first fanfics I ever read, though, like a Damian and Danny pairing, because again, there's not a lot of like fully like fanfic like prompts, well, but like fanfictions, there aren't a lot. But the first one I ever found was press heart to subscribe, which I was like, so immediately when I read that, I was like, so definitely has to do with Danny either starting a YouTube channel, like something. He's a streamer, but and Damian stumbles upon it because one of the clips of Danny went viral because he was basically defending Robin. Like, he's a little bit more violent. It's like, good. I'm glad he's a bit more violent. I want them, it's fine. And so, it's him defending, Robin. It's like, oh, no. And Damian's he's not immediately oh, this is, but he is intrigued and he is curious about the person. And so he does kind of, he does end up checking out more of Danny's streams, and he ends up getting really invested. So he ends up becoming a member, everything. He's so invested into it. And he ends up, what starts the interaction, because obviously Danny's a Twitch streamer and Damian is, he usually has it on in the background. He's paying attention and watching, also doing work. But what ends up with the interaction of how they start is because at one moment, I think it was the moment where I can't remember, but it was either the one where he was ranking the toys or he was talking about his experience. I think it was the one where he was talking about his experience. He's like, oh yeah, I live in Gotham. It's I know it's stupid. I was out late when I shouldn't have been, and blah blah. And because everyone was asking, because he ended up with a bruise, and so he's like, I was out late when I shouldn't have been. I know. And he ends up, he's like, oh, one of the vigilantes saved me, and so they obviously want a story. And Damian, he's like, I would remember, because Danny wears a mask, I should say. So he wears a face mask, so all you're able to see is just his eyes. But he's like, I would have recognized those eyes anyway. It's like, there's no way. It's like, maybe it's right. And it's like, there's no way. It's like, it had to be one of his brothers. And he's like, obviously a little upset by that. And so, Danny ends up telling a story of how it was a scarecrow attack, and it was Red Robin that ended up saving him. And Danny immediately kind of, because all the comments are like, oh, is Red Robin replacing your favorite, Robin as your favorite? And Damian's he's kind of upset about that, because he's a little jealous. He's like, there's no way, I'm the favorite. And so he ends up donating a bunch of money to him so it could sidetrack the kind of so he gets sidetracked. And Danny's a little surprised. He's like, oh, is this a mistake, or because it gives a lot of money? And so even after the stream kind of ends, he does end up contacting Damian, and he does end up not texting, but whatever, right? So to say oh, did you was it a mistake? If you want your money back, and it's oh, it was a mistake. So that was their first interaction, and how they kind of got into contact with each other, which I thought it was cute. And I remember, because he's always there, so Danny even noticed Damian wasn't there for one of the streams, because Damian was on patrol, and Damian was even upset that he missed it, because yeah, he can rewatch it because it was recorded, but it's not the same as it's not live. And he so Danny notices he's not there, obviously, and ends up chatting to him. I think they're on Discord, as it was. He's chatting to him over, and he's like, oh, you weren't there, and it's and Damian's pleasantly surprised. So it's the start of their friendship, and that slowly develops into just something more, which I like. It's very cute, kind of it's very cute. It's one of the first ones that I have ever seen of them together, because there's not a lot at all. Then there's Robin's Egg. This one isn't a romantic one or anything. It's just where Danny's heavily injured, right? And Damian is the one to end up finding him, and because Danny is so heavily injured, he ends up retreating back into his core, which leaves Damian with Danny's core, which just happens to kind of look like a rock. But but so Damian is the one who ends up taking care of him, and it at least a whole series of like, you know, Tim, Jason, like, so everyone kind of just like looking at Damian. It's like they make a joke out of it at first, thinking like, oh, is that like your egg? And you know, Damian's like, yeah, my egg, sure. It's like he just goes along with it. It's like, sure. And you know, it's like, and Tim's just like, it's a rock, and Dick's just like, just let him just have this, like, just imagination. Just like, it's a rock. It's like, just let him have this. So it's very, you know. And then you start to notice maybe some things are happening. Like, they were chasing after, was it Penguin? And Damian ends up in water, but it freezes over like a lot because Danny, even while still in his core, he can kind of feel what's going on around him, and Damian can also kind of feel what Danny feels, kind of like, you know, especially since he wears it like he wears Danny like his core. At first he just kind of carried it around with him, like, you know, like when he was on patrol, he would carry it around with him in his pouches. But then he got a necklace because Tim made it. He didn't want to admit it, a protective case, so he carries it around his neck. So it's, you know, it's very sweet. And they've had this sort of GIW obviously kind of come in because like they couldn't pick up, you know, Danny's core, and so it's up to him and John, which he does let in on the secret, like John being like, this is, you know, it's, he's like, I'm protecting it, like, you know, it's a person, it's not really like, not like, you know, it's not a rock or anything. And so Cujo also gets involved, which is one of the first instances they meet a ghost, because, you know, they find out about the anti-echo acts, right? And so they meet Cujo, who's, you know, just a sweet ghost dog. And I love how, like, it's Tim, Alfred, and Bruce, you know, who end up, you know, they meet Cujo, right? And so Damian's like, it's like, you know, does he look non-sentient to you? And Tim points out, he's like, well, he looks like the definition of no thoughts, head empty, but, you know, I see your point. It's like, okay, it's not, like, this isn't clearly, like, you know, so they're like, you know, they work together to, you know, dismantle the laws and everything, get everything in order. And I will say, when Danny finally kind of comes out, which it was by accident, it was early, so it was way too early for Danny to kind of reform, but so much was happening all at once. So when he did, he was a toddler, still all his memories intact and whatever, but like at this point you have to play the part of, you know, being a toddler. So, and everyone's kind of rightfully freaking out because they're like, I'm sorry, is that a child? He's like, yes, like, it's my egg, you know, again, playing, because he's been playing into it. He's not like, you know, he's been playing into it. He's like, oh my god, you were serious about that. It's like, we didn't, like, you know, they didn't think he was. It's like, they just thought like, oh yeah, it's like, even like he was playing along with it, right? It's like, oh yeah, like, but didn't think that it was, like, you know, his Danny. But it's so I love it. It's so, I don't know, it's different of Damian taking care of Danny. Because, I mean, like, toddler Danny, again, he still has all his memories, so it's not like he's really like a toddler. He just looks like a toddler because he reformed too early, so he isn't really, like, you know, he's still the same teenager, really. He just doesn't look like it. Let's see, another one is, Amity in the Ghost Zone. When was that anyway? I feel it was like, was that towards the end of the series where, you know, he's fighting Peridot and like Amity gets pulled into like the Ghost Zone. So they took that and it's like, well, what if it just kind of got stuck in the Ghost Zone and like it never left? And so it just kind of like it took that and it was like, it never left. And they've lived kind of peacefully since then and just kind of done whatever, right? So that is until I don't remember how it starts, but Constantine and like Batman ever the cure like has to figure everything out, kind of catch on to this, and are like, this was an entire town. And so then they're like, so then they go like, obviously have to investigate, and they have to go and investigate. There aren't that many chapters, I should say, but it is like an interesting idea, and like I do like it if Amity just like never left the ghost zone. I was like, well, they would probably be just integrated into the ghost zone, like, so it wouldn't, I like it. It'd be interesting. And I mean, there's another one where let's see, where Amity, I think it was, because there's two separate ones where it absorbs so much, like the Amity becomes like a living kind of city. So because it becomes like a living city, it can move around to different points in time, to different universes, and to different just overall planets. But there's two separate ones. So one of them is on like one of them on Tumblr, the other one's on like AO3. The one on Tumblr I thought was really cute because they show up in Gotham, right? Or not Gotham, they show up in Metropolis. They're on their way to Gotham because that's where Lazarus Pit is, which is to them just ectoplasm. They just need to, but they're traveling around. It's like for their field trip, whatever, right? And they speak of the past worlds they went to. Like, they went to My Hero Academia. They went to, like, and it's just like, oh, they tried to sneak Midori onto the bus. And he's like, Mr. Lance just like, don't kidnap anyone from here. Just stop. Like, they very clearly tried to kidnap Midori. It was like, okay, concerning. But the one on AOP is like the one where Amity is just like, they like, it's not just that it travels around. It also, like, at first it started traveling around, but would always go back to its original point, right? Until it eventually just stopped doing that. And no one was really concerned by this. They were a little confused, and like a little like, but they eventually got used to it, especially since not only did it do that, it also just kind of rearranged things inside the town itself. So at one moment you would have like a shortcut, like, oh, you want to get to school? That's fine. Just go through your backyard. There's a shortcut right there. And then 5 minutes later, it wouldn't be the same shortcut. It'd be something entirely different. But so there's like different, like, the town itself kind of moves around too. So like the buildings and like the roads, like everything kind of moves. But the people, like, always know. They kind of always know where everything is. It's just kind of like almost like instinct. They always know where everything is. So it never really bothers them. And then the first instant, like, because of that, they always have field trips. And, they're just like, oh, let's explore this planet or this time period or whatever they are, right? And because of that, they often do have to make stops. They are a self-sufficient town, obviously, but they do still have to often make stops to go to other stores and everything outside of, the town. But because of that one of the first instances they found out, like, no, like, because they always try to rush back, because there's like a timer set, like, they always try to rush back, like, before Amity kind of just leaves. And so the first instance where, someone accidentally, like, they're, they lose track of time, but like they're still in like the city and that's when Amity disappears to go to a different spot. But the person also disappears. So to other people, it just literally looks like this person just out of thin air is gone. Like, there one moment and then gone the next. But for that person, it was also kind of the same. Gone. They were there one moment, and next thing they know, they're back in their town. They're like, oh, okay. So that's when they started learning, oh, it doesn't matter. And because they're so anchored to the town, like, it'll just, okay. So they could just, so they could take their time, just, they could technically take their time and just kind of, and it doesn't have much, but like, I love it. It's like, such a, I don't know, I like the idea of it, and like how cities do have, so it's not just Amity, like cities do have spirits. And so you have Gotham, Metropolis, and like so all they visit. Oh my god, what's the city called again? Flash's city is like the first one they visit, and he's Barry's kind of talking to Danny, and he's like asking a question, and he's like, right, well, you're not, Danny's always like, what are you, a cop? It's like so he's like, well, it doesn't matter. It's like you're not gonna, and you're really like, it's almost time for me to go anyway, and Danny ends up disappearing because Amity left. It was time to go to a different location. So, but again, 10 outsider's perspective, so Barry looked like dead one moment, gone the next. So, definitely raised some red flags, but I loved it. Wait, I'm a what is definitely one of the, not something I expected, because we start off like we don't really even get like how Danny really ended up in Gotham. He just is there, and he's in this part of, is it technically crime? I don't know, but he's like in this part of Gotham that's not really, it's like a gray zone, so no one's ever really claimed it, but it is right by like Red Hood's territory. And so the people there are used to Danny by that point, and so it's basically the story of how Danny just kind of accidentally became like a crime lord. It's like, how did this even happen? So, but it's because he's just, he's a spirit, like he likes protecting people and like helping them, and also loves the stars, obviously. So that's just something he's always done. So he's doing that to his own, his haunt, his territory. And so, he calls it his haunt too, when he says it's like kids that follow him around, and like, he's like, and he stops conveniently, like, because again, it adds up with the whole, I don't know if it's supposed to be like, if he can just sense it anyway, but I think it is leaning more towards like, because Jason died and brought back, the whole Lazarus pit and everything, so he can sense Jason, and clearly sense like that's his territory, so he knows not to go that far, because like it's Danny. He doesn't really want any problems. He's just like looking at his own territory, and so people were kind of relieved because like, well, because it's been a gray area for so long that now they clearly have protection, because Danny doesn't look like much, but they call him Bright Eyes too because his eyes glow, but because he doesn't look much, but he clearly, very clearly is. And then Killer Croc ends up in the mix somehow, which he doesn't kill, he doesn't call him Killer Croc. He's just like, he just asked him, like, what is it? And, like, he just starts calling him that, like, his actual name. And because Danny is so cool with him, everyone is wary at first, but once, they kind of see how Danny reacts around him and how he's just kind of, like, so they're equally okay with him too. So it's not even like they treat him normal, which I'm like, I can see where this is going. I like it. So I love that. It's just how he accidentally became a crime lord. Danny doesn't know anything about that, by the way, I should say, because he's just explaining, because like he just asked the questions like, oh, why do you stop, like, because he's just wandering around at the edge of his, like, going throughout his territory, seeing how everyone's okay, nothing's going wrong, right? But he always stops at this, like, kind of like, almost like there's an invisible line. He always stops there because that is where his territory ends and where Jason's kind of begins. And so he's asked that, and he's like, why do you always stop there? It's like, I'm not going to intrude on someone's haunt. It's like, it's like, I'm not trying to start anything. And because everyone knows that's very clear, like, that's Red Hood's territory, they're like, see, I told you, he's a crime lord. He just doesn't look like it because or act like much like a crime lord. He's just, Danny. So they're like, see, I told you, like, he's our crime, like, we're in his territory. Like, so they're no longer like in a gray area. They're, but because of that, Danny has no idea that technically, like, he's somehow become a crime lord. He's just protecting his haunt. Like, that's what it is to him. And he's just answering questions. So I do remember that. One of my favorite tropes, one of my favorite tropes is DH Danny, and it could go both. Sometimes he'll remember, like in some fanfictions, he'll remember like plenty, like he'll remember everything, and in others will be DH and like he won't remember much of anything. And sometimes it's a mix where he'll remember some things but not everything, so he's not like, but he's DH and is taken in by Jason because a lot of times it is like cause to like, basically. So Danny, obviously, sometimes knowing, he's like, sometimes even without knowing of like, because in some fanfics he's like, he doesn't really remember much, but he still knows like Jason's kind of like him. So Jason, of course, has no idea what the hell he's talking about, but so Jason ends up taking him in and basically ends up adopting, and it's the funniest thing to me. It's so, I don't know, it's so funny to me. But there's one where it's Danny and Danny, so Danny with Y, Danny with an I, like, and they're looking at Jason. He's like, "So what are your names?" Like, Danny, Danny. He's like, okay. It's like, he's looking at her. He's like, "Why did you spell that?" He's like, "Well, kids are peculiar, I guess." He's like, "What's your name?" It's like, and Danny obviously following along because she's also a gremlin. She's like, "Danny, Danny." It's like, oh my god! It's like your parents named both of you Danny. It's like, why? It's like, okay, well, you have a nickname. It's like, well, Danny's a nickname. It's like, yeah, it's like, can't one of you just go by Danny? It's like, no. It's like, I will never ask that of her. It's like, all right, girl Danny and boy Danny are really great, so so he's like, I'm not gonna call you that. It's like, girl Danny and boy Danny aren't great, so but he ends up taking them in because like he's thinking like maybe they have a connection to the assassins. He's like thinking of like, oh, the Lazarus pits and everything. And so once he gets them into his safe house and like he gets them eating and everything, he gets them talking. He's even more horrified. He's like, oh, the Lazarus pits and like the League of Assassins. And I was like, they have no idea what he's talking about. He's like, what are you talking about to me right now? It's like, he's like, oh, he's like, that's Daniel. She's like, that sounds awesome. It's like, we're not gonna be assassins. Like, okay, so which immediately kind of like, okay, so they have no idea. They're not part of it because they have like no idea what he's talking about. But it does lead to him like because they do explain to him like what's happening. It's like, oh, and you're in the same boat as us too, kind of like which is why they kind of attached on to him, because like you're kind of in the same boat as us. Like, you're gonna be hunted then too. It's like, so Jason's like, so now I have to look into these GIW people. Like, I have to like, so it's a whole thing going for him. So that whole trope is it's a lot of angst too, like I should say, because sometimes it's usually where Danny is fleeing his home dimension, or he's fleeing from, he ran away to Gotham somehow, away from the GIW or his parents, or both usually. So there's, I don't know, it's really angsty, but the family moment is really cute to me. The Rebirth of Tim Drake. I didn't even know what to think when I heard, because I was like, okay, sure, I'm interested now. The Rebirth of Tim Drake is basically like, they're fighting League of Assassins, and they're near the Lazarus Pit, and Tim gets thrown in basically, and he ends up dying, because of course he does, and he ends up becoming a half of like Danny, and obviously Tim is like very confused, like, and he doesn't know what's going on, and so he ends up staying basically in Amity because until he gets his like powers of control, and and he knows how to handle himself with his everything of being dead. So, and they end up patrolling, him and Danny and his friends. He ends up patrolling with them to take out some ghosts. And to work on it. And so he ends up becoming like a different vigilante, basically. He takes on a new name, like a new kind of everything, like a new outfit and everything. And do I love it. It's also, I'm pretty sure, because it's been a little bit since I read it, since it's been a while since it's been updated, but I'm pretty sure it is like a Tim and Danny kind of like ship. I'm pretty sure. So, so meanwhile, like, we have glimpses of the back, like they're trying to look for Tim because like they, there's no way like he's dead or anything like that. And they briefly like dig, because we go to Dick and he's refusing to believe that Tim is dead, because he's like, Tim refused to believe that Bruce was dead, in the moment when he was lost at the time. So he's like, so there's no way Tim would ever be, he's not. And Danny, so that's their side of it until they finally they do end up fighting Tim. And it's been a while since I read, because it's been a while since it's been updated, but it is so, do I love it though. It is so, and it does have Tim, like, he kind of wants to stay, and he does want to stay there with Danny and all of them, because he's like, well, Danny could use the help, and like, there's nothing I can't do that any of you, like, and that, like, any of you can't do in Gotham, like, he's like, but here, like, they need me. It's like, and I, he's like, he doesn't really want to leave that behind. And it's like, very sweet. And it gets interrupted, because obviously, of course it does, because ghost attack happens. So, like, of course, but it's very sweet. So, I think at this point, I'm just like, I feel this channel is just like where I talk about the fandoms I'm in and what fanfics I read. Just like a fic recommendation. I don't know. Yeah. So thank you all for listening this far in, which, I don't know why, but thank you for listening this far in, and until next time, whenever that is. So, bye.